Today I want to talk about why Cars 3 is the best. Not the best movie in general, I wouldn't go that far, but it is in my humble opinion the best movie in the Cars franchise. Now I know I might be stepping on some nerves here and there, I'm sure most people's favorite is the first Cars movie, and who can blame you? It's a great movie, but let me explain.
Lightning's ready. This one's for you, Doc.
On this channel we revisit old classics and talk about if they're still good or maybe if they even got better. We also take a look at these movies from an adult's perspective, and oh boy does this movie have some adult themes. The most prominent one being the theme of legacy, but more on that later. As always, first things first, is it still good? Since I told you that this is my favorite movie in the franchise, I can answer this question very easily. Yes, of course it's still good. Just to freshen up your memory, Cars 3 is about Lightning McQueen and his legacy. He starts the movie at the top of his game. He's incredibly fast and wins almost every race and just has a good time. But then a rookie beats him.
Did you say meet or beat?
I think you heard me.
What?
That rookie is part of a new generation of cars that are more aerodynamic, have a higher top speed, and are more efficient with their cornering. So the big question of the movie becomes how McQueen handles this situation. It's about when he should retire and how to best honor his legacy. McQueen wants to keep racing, but McQueen starts to realize that he isn't the fastest anymore and he probably never will be the fastest anymore. So he decides that the best way to honor his legacy is to pass on his knowledge to the next generation. And that next generation for him is Cruz Ramirez, who was first tasked with training him, but now actually becomes his successor. And I think that's a great story, and it's just perfect for the last movie in a franchise. And one thing that I liked more about this movie than the first Cars movie is that it wasn't as predictable. It's kind of the halfway point of the movie where you notice that, okay, while McQueen is getting trained, he's actually training Cruz more than Cruz is training him. And they share their story about how Doc Hudson honored his legacy by passing on his knowledge to McQueen. So it really comes full circle, and at that point you kind of know that it's going to be about McQueen now becoming the coach of Cruz. But nevertheless, I think at least for the first half of the movie, you don't really know what's going to happen. And with the first Cars movie, it was a very classic story about a cocky racer that learns humility and then makes new friends and uses that humility to learn more about racing and then uses that knowledge to win his last race. It's a good story, don't get me wrong, but I think it was very predictable, and the story of Cars 3 was more exciting for me because of those reasons.
Lesson 1. You're old. Accepted.
I told him that.
Another thing that I really liked about Cars 3, and again, this is probably not going to be for everyone because I didn't really like Cars 2, so this movie did the great thing of basically forgetting that Cars 2 ever existed, and instead really focuses on honoring the first movie.
Career on a wall.
There are so many references, and all the relationships established in Cars 1 are still intact in this movie, and yet the story of Cars 3 allows itself to establish and focus on new relationships. Radiator Springs, Sally, and Mater all show up throughout the movie, so it feels connected, but the focus is on McQueen's legacy, and thereby his relationship with his trainer and successor Cruz Ramirez. Of course, if you really like Cars 2, and as I learned in the comments on my last video, there's quite a few of you out there, then I guess you're all out of luck, because there's really no references to Cars 2. But for me that was a positive.
Oh, I'll get him on the horn! Get it? On the horn?
Because this is an animated movie, of course, I gotta talk about the technicalities and the visuals, and oh boy, they are so impressive. In my Cars 2 video I said that they made improvements especially in the lighting department, but in Cars 3 they just took it to the next level. They further improved the lighting, but now the textures are just so crisp, and everything looks so beautiful. I mean, just look at this scenery for example. I mean, ignore the cars for a second, just look at the sand, the waves, the water, and the light hitting everything. It looks so good, right? I mean, even in 2024.
This is beautiful. I can see why Mr. Sterling said you wanted a train out here.
I almost want to say that it looks real, but I think that's really where their magic lies, because they managed to make everything look so good without making it look too real so that the cars then feel kind of out of place. It's really a very harmonious picture. Great stuff, Pixar.
Time to go!
46 miles per hour.
Before we get into the adult themes that really made this my favorite movie in the franchise, let's revisit my favorite 3 scenes together. Scene number 1. Cruz learning to drive on sand. As I mentioned earlier, this scene is not only the perfect example for beautiful scenery, I think it's very clever to have Cruz need to stay in range of McQueen to track his speed. I mean, at this point it's still all about McQueen improving his racing, but in hindsight, when you learn that it turns out he actually trained Ramirez, this scene really makes a lot of sense. And needing her to stay close to him forced him to teach her how to drive on something different than asphalt. And if you think about it, where Cruz is in this scene is exactly where McQueen was in Cars 1. He was also completely overwhelmed when he drove on something different than asphalt. So this is really where he starts to pass on his knowledge to Cruz, and it's a very organic start without making it too predictable. And it's also hilarious how difficult it is for Cruz to drive on sand. Scene number 2, a towel as hair. This scene really isn't anything special, but I just think it was hilarious. It actually took me a couple of seconds to notice that this car just has a towel strapped to her head, but you know exactly what hairstyle that would be in the human world. Do you think that's where the TikTok trend started, to have a towel on your head to show that you're acting as a woman? Scene number 3, the confidence of Cruz Ramirez in the last race.
Good evening, Storm.
How did you...
Just back here drafting on your butt. Nothing to be concerned.
Cruz really spent the entire movie being very shy and doubtful of herself. At least when she was outside of her comfort zone. I mean, as a trainer, she wasn't shy at all, but as soon as she had to drive on something different than asphalt or race herself, she was very doubtful. But in this scene, it finally clicked for her, and it was so hilarious and very rewarding to see her finally challenge the leader Storm. She finally stopped doubting herself and really unlocked her full potential, and suddenly it was so easy for her to keep up.
My GPS is saying I have slow traffic in my way.
No, you are not winning this.
Now let's dive into the adult themes, starting with the most obvious but nonetheless best one, the theme of legacy. It doesn't get more adult than that, right? What theme could be more relevant for adults than the question of what to do when you're past your prime? I mean, this movie focuses on Doc Hudson passing on his knowledge to McQueen, and McQueen then training Cruz to lead the next generation of racers. As most of us probably aren't a world champion, we're not likely to end up in exactly the same situation. But everybody that has kids or someday will have kids is going to end up in a very similar situation. A big part of adult life is trying to pass on everything you learned to your kids so that they can be even more successful or more fulfilled than you are. And that's why this movie with that theme really hits home for me. They also take the time to have McQueen actually consider all the options he has in that situation. He can do what his sponsor is telling him to do and reap the financial rewards of his career by focusing on marketing and building a brand. He can do what he wants to do for the first half of the movie and just keep racing, but thereby risking to damage his legacy by just becoming an average midfield car. He could also do what he worries about having to do and just quit everything altogether, or he can transition from a racer to becoming a mentor for the next generation. That's what made Doc Hudson's life so fulfilling. And McQueen is starting to notice that that's also what fulfills him.
Kid's got a lot of stuff. Hey, Doc?
I think there's no better way McQueen could have honored his legacy, and it's also the perfect theme for at least currently the last movie of the franchise. In general, I just also like the theme of legacy a bit more than the theme of the cocky rookie that learns humility. With a cocky rookie from the first Cars movie, you basically know how the movie is going to end right at the start. But with the theme of legacy, there are some more options that make it less predictable.
Racing wasn't the best part of Hud's life. You were.
I also really like the theme of self-doubt and missed potential. Cruz Ramirez is really the embodiment of that theme in this movie, and in her case it's about racing, but if you generalize it a bit more, it's really about her being very good and passionate about something as a kid, then getting one chance to prove that she is special, failed to make use of that one opportunity, and then never felt like she was worthy again. At the same time, she had so many people around her telling her that she couldn't do something, and she believed them. It's only through her new mentor figure, Lightning McQueen, that she finally had the opportunity and the confidence to prove everybody wrong and make her dream reality by becoming a racer.
You are a racer.
Use that.
Now, I did say that it's my favorite movie in the franchise, and those two themes are the main reasons for that, but nonetheless, I still want to address some of its shortcomings. The first problem arises right at the start, because this movie has to compensate for Cars 2 that didn't really focus on Lightning McQueen. Because Cars 2 failed to show us McQueen really at the height of his career and really building that legacy, they had to cover the entire period of McQueen dominating, but because this movie isn't about that, they went from McQueen dominating to his downfall in like 5 minutes. That doesn't feel organic, but I think they did the best with the cards they were dealt by their prequels. My other complaint is that while this movie wasn't as predictable, it still was relatively predictable. After like the first half, we know that McQueen is basically training Cruz more than he's training himself, but McQueen only seems to realize it in the last 10 minutes. But those are really the only complaints I have. Other than that, I really like how this movie chose to continue McQueen's journey.
Wow. Subtle.
Figured if I'm gonna be your crew chief, I'd better do it in style.
As I said, most of you probably like the first Cars movie the most, and I can't blame you. The first one always has something special, and that nostalgic feeling when watching it today is just unbeatable. I just hope that I could lighten up your memory of Cars 3, and if you perhaps saw Cars 1 several times, but Cars 3 only once or twice, I hope I could encourage you to go watch it again. I think you will love it even more in 2024. At least I did. Now, if you haven't watched my other videos, go check out my video on Cars 1. Otherwise, let me know your thoughts on Cars 3. Is it also your favorite? And let me know what other movies we should revisit, and I'll see you in the next one.